I'm here at the Ulster Museum in Belfast, having a look at some of the fossils and ancient artefacts that they have on display here. I've been inspired to visit here due to my guest in today's episode. As much as scientific and technological advances can tell us more and more of the origins of life and what early primitive life was like, we're not going to find any display in a museum that tells us a lot about what happens in the next life, or if indeed there is a next life. So instead, we have to ask questions and go searching elsewhere. Afterlives with Colin Dardis. So I'm here with Professor Mark Cooper, who is the Chief Geologist from the Geological Survey of Northern Ireland. I was going to introduce him as Dr. Mark Cooper, but he has recently told me he's been upgraded, Matrix style, to Professor. So congratulations, first of all, on that,
Thank
Mark.
you, Colin.
Excellent, great to hear. And just to say, obviously with the podcast, we're just talking to ordinary people about their own views and opinions. So Mark is here just obviously talking for his own beliefs rather than any official representative of the survey, just to get that disclaimer out of the way. So Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously we've had a little bit of a kind of prelim discussion before recording, but I just wanted to ask initially, is there any particular label or term that you would put on your own set of beliefs or outlook at all?
Well, you know, I'm a scientist, and I think since childhood, or maybe early adulthood, I've thought about this, and the only label I can really put on myself is atheist. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And how young are we talking about here that you first kind of was aware of this?
Well, when I was really young, say when I was still going to primary school, my mother had Christian belief. My father didn't. We didn't go to church, but you know, at school we would have had Christian. What's the word for when everybody gets together?
Assemblies.
That's right. Yeah, Christian assemblies. And at the end of each assembly, we would have been required to recite, the Lord's Prayer. And I can remember our headmaster getting really quite angry at the entire school at how poorly everybody was managing to recite this prayer. At school, I had, Christianity around me, and at home. But my father was certainly a non-believer, and I think whenever I sort of got into science, and in particular started to learn about geology, which is my profession, I found it harder to actually reconcile Christian beliefs or any other kind of afterlife or religious belief.
It's interesting that you've got two very different parental influences there. Was there ever any sense of being pulled more towards one than the other, or were you kind of just given free rein to make up your own mind along the way?
Yeah, there was no pressure placed upon me. As I say, my mother was Christian. She made it clear that she believed in God. But we weren't a church-going family. There was no requirement to put on the Sunday best and do that. And my father certainly didn't push his lack of faith on me. So I just made my own way.
You said obviously you kind of came to these initial thoughts very young, but at that stage, had you already been developing an interest in science as well?
Well, I think, as a kid, I discovered dinosaurs. I think a lot of kids do. and at that stage, you're even at primary school level, you're being the concept of geological time is being kind of drilled into you. These Jurassic dinosaurs, for example. So I was well aware of the extreme time that we're dealing with in terms of Earth history. The other thing that I got into as a kid was fossil hunting, and my dad's garage and tools, anything that could break rock was pilfered from the garage.
Excellent.
And was usually broken on rock, much to my dad's dismay. But finding these remarkable fossils in rock was another part of this kind of development of this geological science. And from primary age through junior school, I was getting interested in the earth, in past life, and evolution, I guess.
So I'm wondering, these early experiences of hunting for fossils and very much seeing a physical remnant of a past life must have been very influential on your decision to maybe turn away from the spiritual side of things. Would that be fair enough to say?
Yeah, reconcile. I mean, I guess when you learn about Christianity, and you're provided with the earth is created in 7 days, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're faced then with what you're being told about scientifically, that dinosaurs were about from the, let's say, from the Permian through to the Jurassic, 250 million years ago through to about 60 million years ago. It's kind of hard to reconcile the two. Yeah, that was where I started to think, well, what's written in the Bible does not tally with what I'm learning scientifically here. So
there is geological evidence of a great flood, however, isn't there?
Absolutely. Creationists often use this as part of their evidence for justifying that the Earth is maybe 6,000 years old. The evidence that I'm familiar with is not actually my area of expertise in geology, but the evidence that I'm familiar with is that during maybe the final stages of the last ice age, water was able to break through in certain areas and flood bits of ground that were previously dry. And it was simply the melting of our ice caps and their retreat back to the poles and the creation of just huge volumes of meltwater that were fueling these floods. And it may be that some of those events may have actually been witnessed by our ancestors and then passed down as stories from generation to generation.
It is possible the Great Flood exists in other cultures and backgrounds outside of Christianity, so it's interesting to think that...
I know the Mediterranean was flooded at one stage. The Straits of Gibraltar were closed. Wow. And then earth movements actually led to the breakthrough of the Atlantic, I guess, and it flooded that Mediterranean basin, which that would have been a really great flood. So,
and I want to utilize your scientific expertise here then, because when we think about death, and maybe for some of us we don't really consider the afterlife too much before we've had a bereavement or we've attended a funeral, and here in Ireland our tradition is mostly either we'll cremate or we'll return people to the earth. And you said as a scientist that you believe in atoms and molecules and the formation and breaking down of material structures. Just kind of wondering from a personal point of view then, for the body that remains, is it a comfort or is it a worry to kind of think that this is the ultimate end for a body, that it will
be absorbed back into the earth.
I have no worries about dying, about my body breaking apart, be it in a forced way through a cremation, or through a more natural way through actually decaying in the ground. So yeah, as you said, as a scientist, I believe that everything exists through combinations of atoms and molecules. Those relationships being determined through those strings of code, DNA, defining what a life form looks like, be it a single celled amoeba or a really complex multicellular organism like us. It's those blueprints of life that determine how your atoms and molecules are actually existing in us, in a being. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this leading up to this interview. About how, okay, we've got those blueprints and the molecules. They're living in together, and they're getting on, and we're doing things. I'm moving my hands at the minute, and and that's incredible. But there must be some kind of shelf life to the DNA. So that the shelf life of my DNA means that my molecules can stay together for, if luck is on my side, 70 to 80 years, whereas my wee dog, might only have 12 to 14 years. I just find it's I'm amazed that life exists, that it can operate in such complex ways, and indeed evolve to fit whatever the world can throw at it.
So I'm wondering if not believing in an afterlife, how that might impact on how one handles grief.
Yeah.
If it makes it easier or harder.
I don't know. I mean, I have experienced grief. I lost my dad some time ago. As I say, he was a non-believer as well. I don't fear that his soul is burning in hell or anything like that. I just believe that he's gone. Whatever was holding those molecules, those atoms and molecules together, that life force, it just couldn't hold them together any longer, and he was gone. Obviously, I grieved his passing. I still miss him, but yeah. He won't be burning in hell, and he won't be wearing his slippers in heaven, in my book. So,
is there any sense of any kind of essence being returned to the earth at all?
Now my dad was cremated, and I took his ashes to one of his favourite places, which was on the Isle of Man, a wee place called Derby Haven. And he used to have a boat there, and I had many years of joy with him out on that boat, fishing. Not so much he was more of a sailor, I was more of a fisherman.
Didn't know
so
that.
We kind of combined efforts, and that he would sail at a speed that allowed me to catch fish. But anyway, I returned his ashes to Derby Haven Bay, where his boat would have plied through the waves there, and whenever I go back to the Isle of Man, I go back to where those ashes, where I threw those ashes, and I imagine him on the boat. So I feel that he's there, his ashes are there, and the memories still live. So in some ways, I guess he lives on through my memories.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Each episode, I'm going to be reading a short poem, partially inspired by the conversations that I've had with my guests. This one is called Human Dust. If I was risen from the dust and given this brittle body, shall I then return to the soil, once remains have been left to rust, in blankets of clay and sod be found devoid of my mortar coil? Or will this body be risen, reformed, mint and glorified, a new stock culled from a dead seed, let out from my earthly prison, inheritance of death denied, and into another life freed?
I want to steer the conversation in a slightly different way now. Again, but thinking about a geological aspect.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there a completely environmental friendly way to get rid of the dead? Or what would be the best method geologically?
Oh my lord. Okay. Well, this. I was actually thinking about this on the way here.
Oh, good, right.
And I certainly, but I believe that cremation is probably the most unenvironmentally friendly way of doing things.
Is it because of a high carbon footprint?
Well, yes, that's right. You're using energy to cremate the body, and when you're cremating the body, you're releasing all of that carbon dioxide into the air. Burial is probably the most environmentally friendly way. Essentially, through decades, your body will reduce essentially into soil, and at least some of that carbon will remain in the soil. So, in the way that we do things, and I couldn't think of another method, to be quite honest with you, but the way that we do things now, burial is probably the most environmentally friendly way.
I'm also wondering, as a member of the scientific community then, do you find, and I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to other scientists about this, do you find that it would be typical that people would steer more towards atheism or being agnostic amongst scientists?
Well, my experience in Northern Ireland is, I find it really interesting, and is that amongst my colleagues there is a lot of faith.
Oh.
There are more of my colleagues are Christian and practicing Christians than not, and that's absolutely great. If people can reconcile their faith with the science that they're involved with through work, I have respect for that.
Oh, yeah.
So,
of course, we're not here to say that anyone's right or anyone's wrong,
no.
but it is interesting to think how people could work in very similar environments and different backgrounds, but they'll also then come to different conclusions and balance that in different ways as well.
Yeah. On one or two occasions through, and I've worked in geology for 30 years.
Wow.
And if you add in my study, it's nearly 40 years. But since coming to Northern Ireland, I've had various interactions with geologists in different places. But the occasional creationist geologist has crossed my path, and we've had some interesting conversations.
Which is weird, because to me that sounds almost like an oxymoron.
Well, he was more than comfortable in the fact that the Earth was 6,000 years old, and whilst in a quarry where I believed the rocks were Triassic in age and Cretaceous in age, so between 250 and say 90 million years old, this particular geologist was pointing out features in the quarry related to the Great Flood. We had to agree to disagree. So
very interesting. I would like to hear this person's point of views as well on how they managed to square that particular circle.
I've certainly heard of more of talking to other geologists. It is quite rare for people to have the creationist belief in geology, but I have heard other examples of people going right through university with the creation, belief in creationism, and pursuing a career, and basically they don't. All the geological processes are fine. so how rocks form and such like, and can change through different earth processes. It's just the timescales are different. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was a case of just very two distinct parallel lines between faith and professional study, and they don't cross. But if we're changing the timeline, then that's how they resolve it.
With creationists, then very firmly they're not recognizing the geological timescales that I would recognize as a scientist. My belief that through the various methods that we have available to us now, and these things change. I believe that the Earth was formed around about 4.6 billion years ago. That life probably started to kick in through molecules starting to form complex chains and starting to resemble actual life around maybe 3 billion years ago. And we only really started to see complex life forms at a time that we call it was a transition from what we call the Precambrian into the Cambrian, and the Cambrian was this explosion of complex life. And so we started to see all kinds of weird and wacky fossils getting preserved in the geological record from that time onwards.
And I suppose when you are studying the very beginnings of life as we know it on Earth, a biological life, I suppose that also then would naturally impact on how one views the end of life.
Yeah, well, evolution is a big thing, isn't it? So, if we do go back, say, 3 billion years, and we've got some kind of primordial soup, things are happening in the atmosphere. Maybe we're having water delivered to the Earth through meteorite impacts or other impactors coming and hitting the Earth, maybe even comets. Very early life, super simple, and then through geological time, other events happening. So, say, more impacts with extraterrestrial bodies, or periods of significant volcanism, or periods where we had huge, or what we call all Earth ice ages, snowball Earth. These sorts of events creating change in life, either destroying life through mass extinctions or accelerating the change from more simple to more complex life even. So how do I view life in the future? I think we're the planet determines life. Okay, as a human race, we have kind of engineered our way very quickly into a very powerful life form that is actually influencing and changing the Earth. But ultimately, it's the Earth that's going to have the final say, not us, unfortunately.
It's just too big of an entity to pick a fight with, I guess.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think, when I first went to university, this would have been in the mid-80s, probably was either one of the lecturers or maybe one of our postdocs put this map on the in the foyer of the geology department, and it was a map basically predicting sea level 100 years on from 1986, and I looked at it and went, oh my god, this doesn't look good, because there were large parts of UK and Ireland were underwater, so back then, this is 40 plus years ago, we knew what was happening with the climate. And in fact, I saw another thing quite recently on Facebook, and they had a scientific publication from the 1920s, and it was already predicting a trend in increasing global temperature and warming at that stage. 100 years ago. The warnings were in place. But if you go back 200 years, we had no idea. Absolutely no idea. We were burning coal, digging it out of the ground. Oil got discovered. Whoa, fantastic! Petrol cars, etc. Gas, and everything. Everything was fantastic. No stopping us. Absolutely no stopping us. Until people start to go, well, hold on a minute. The Earth is changing. Look at the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, folks.
So I guess whether one believes in the afterlife or not, the end could be coming sooner than we think from a environmental point of view.
I wouldn't even say it's an end. I'd say it's a change. For us, as an Earth population of humans, change is already upon us. But really serious change is coming. And it's going to be down to how we adapt. So you'll hear this phrase, getting bandied about, but climate change adaptation. That is how we as a species will get through this, and we will get through it. It's not going to be pretty, but we will come out the other side, and it will be a very different human race in 200 years' time.
Thank you very much for that insight. A worrying insight, but definitely one for us to think about and action. Yeah. So Professor Mark Cooper, really appreciate the time with us today. Thank you very much indeed for the insight and for the science lessons as well along the way. One last question, because we've been talking about the future and we're talking about burial. How would you like to go?
How would I like to go? I'd like to say, bury me, and let the bugs and worms do their thing. But I'll probably be cremated and cast to the wind from the top of a mountain that I used to look out at from my childhood house on the Isle of Man, a place called South Barrule. But I will be in the hands of my family, and if I was to join my dad in Derby Haven Bay, I'd be happy as well.
Well, I think either of those options are very suitably poetical pictures that you've painted us for us, Mark. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Colin.
Many thanks to my guest Mark Cooper for sharing his views with us today, and big thanks as always to the Arts Council of Northern Ireland for kindly supporting this podcast through their support for the Individual Artist Programme. No cats or dogs were ate during the making of this podcast.